And hello, friends, and welcome to another episode of Chapters here on Armstrong. Chapters is the television show that profiles local authors, writers, editors, and publishers in our community. And I'm Eliot Parker. It's great to have you with us. Our episode this time comes to you from Empire Books and News at Pullman Square in downtown Huntington. And we are pleased to have author Christina St.Clair with us today. And Christina St.Clair won an award for young adult fiction, and she has been published in essays and has published essays, articles, short stories, and novels. She's been a serious writer for over 20 years, and 4 of her novels, in fact, have been published as ebooks by independent publishers and are also available in print. She co-authored a biography also that was published in China. And of writing, she says, quote, "Maybe the big publishers have turned your books down for years, but never give up. Ebooks are the up-and-coming trend in publishing, and they make the possibility of publication more likely. Take me. I rewrote, reformatted, revised, and sent out tighter versions of 2 young adult novels, and after years of rejection, both finally found publishers. Other advantages of ebooks are their easy accessibility to anyone with a computer, along with their affordability." And those are issues that we will talk about with Christina St.Clair a little bit later on in our interview. But Christina, it's great to have you with us on Chapters. Thanks so much for stopping by.
Thank you, Eliot. It's a pleasure to be here, an honor.
Tell us a little bit about your writing, how you got started in writing. You've been at this now for 20 years or so. What got you interested in writing? What made you decide to become a writer?
I was at one of those pivotal times in my life, trying to decide what I was going to do with the rest of my life, not finding meaning. I was a chemist. My father died suddenly, and I had to go to England for the funeral. And while I was there, my brother was there with his little children from Australia, and I began telling them stories. And I thought, I'm going to do this. I'm going to learn to be a writer. So that was where I began. I didn't know how hard it would be.
I'm glad you asked that, because that was going to lead me right into my next question. We talk about writing a lot, and we have a lot of writers that talk about writing a lot, but one thing that can't really be lost on this is that it is an art. It is like painting, it is like sculpting, it is like writing music, and it takes time, and it takes effort, and it really takes a diligence if you want to do it and you want to do it well. How do you handle that in terms of writing, and what have you learned about writing as you continue to write and as you continue to be published? How have you changed as a writer since the beginning up until now?
Well, I think I was fairly arrogant. I thought, well, anyone could do this. Children's books, simple. And I soon learned that I couldn't do it. In fact, I was pretty poor at it, and it just took a lot of time. I joined a writers group where I learned a lot about children's writing in particular. That was very important for me. I didn't stay in that group for maybe a couple of years. Writers' conferences, wonderful to go and hear other people and just keep on writing and reading. Just never give up.
Who would you say are some of the writers that influence you or have influenced you, and what are you reading right now?
Well, a children's author that I really loved was Madeleine L'Engle. A Wrinkle in Time is a book that influenced me greatly. I loved it. What I'm reading right now, I'm reading a book by Barbara Kingsolver, First Flights. I can't think of the name now, but someone just loaned me it, and I was impressed with the beauty of the language. It made me really aware of different voices and how much skill it takes to reach the stage she is at.
Yeah, Barbara Kingsolver, one of my favorite writers, and I'm like you as well. Sometimes when you read her, I get lost in the language and I forget what I've read. I have to go back and read it again because she writes so well. Let me ask you about some of the books that you've written. We'll talk about that for just a little bit. One book that you wrote and co-wrote with Edwina Pendarvis, which was a fascinating book, Between Two Worlds, a biography of Pearl S. Buck. Tell us a little bit about what that book is about, and how and why did you and Edwina decide to write that kind of a book?
This book?
Okay.
Edwina and I have been friends for a while, and she had a contact with a Chinese guy who actually is the translator. This is a bilingual book, Berlin Fang, and he suggested to her that we could write this book for a publisher he knew in China. And we were both very interested in Pearl S. Buck. We felt that she has been an author who's been kind of neglected for various reasons, and we just thought it would be an interesting project. So it was difficult because a lot of our friends said, "Oh, you don't want to do that," and it was strange. You know, the Chinese publishing house did not give us an advance or a contract. It started out with kind of a note, like, you know, we're going to ask you to do this, but we don't know if we want you to do it. So we were going to do 10 of them, and this was the first one. And Edwina led it. Edwina was the mentor, and she led the process.
So what were some of the challenges of co-authoring a book with someone? A lot of our writers we've talked to have published things all on their own, but when you work with someone and collaborate with someone, not that it presents challenges per se, but it is different. How was that process in terms of working with someone else?
You know, this is the first time I worked with someone else. In my other book, 10 Yen True, I co-authored also, but both very different processes. With Eddie, we sat down and brainstormed, and we both knew quite a bit about Pearl S. Buck and had read some of her stuff and other biographies. And then we decided the chapters we were going to write. And so I think we have about 20, and we said, which one do you want to do? So she would write one, and I would write one. Eventually we got all of them done, and then we simply met and said, well, let's read it. And we put it together. And we had overlapped in places, so we had to cut, you know, and that was our process. The other book was 10 Yen True, and I wrote this actually with my niece in England, who's a writer. It was a huge amount of fun, but I was really nervous because this was my niece, whom I love. And you know how writers are, and I did not want to offend her. So we wrote it over the internet, and I would write a chapter and she would write a chapter. And because this is strictly fiction, she was the inspiration also, but in a different way. She's in her 30s, had a huge amount of energy, was so excited to be doing this, so she drove it with her excitement. And so it was a lot of fun, and we did okay.
That's great.
We're still friends.
Well, that's great.
fact,
still able to speak to each other, right?
We still speak, and we're writing another one. So
fantastic. That's great. You mentioned Pearl S. Buck as a writer, and a lot of people are familiar with her book, The Good Earth. In fact, that's still required reading for a lot of students, and a lot of us can remember having to read that in public school along the way. Why do you think Pearl Buck is overlooked when we talk about the pantheon of writers, and especially of writers in the 20th century? Why do you think she gets overlooked as one of the mainstays for her contributions to writing?
Well, The Good Earth is a brilliant book. It's deeply contemplative. So some of her books are amazing, and that's one. Some of them are pretty. They're not as good, but she wrote prolifically, and she kind of gets blamed, I think, for some of the books that weren't as high a standard. And she, you know, her second husband was her editor, and I think he overlooked a lot of things that perhaps he shouldn't have. And also the timing. You know, as a woman writing then, and she got a Nobel Prize in literature. Many of the academe didn't appreciate her down-to-earth sort of writing. So that's my take on it.
You know, she reminds me a lot when you talk about, you know, her prolific writing. She reminds me a lot of Agatha Christie. You know, obviously two different styles of writers, two different genres, but you know, Agatha Christie was very prolific, and she penned a lot of books during her time, almost as many after she got a divorce from her husband as before. But kind of those same criticisms, you know, there were the Hector Poirot stories and some of the others, but then some in between that people feel like, you know, weren't her best work. So she and Buck kind of share that, I think, in common, that because everything wasn't, you know, a Pulitzer Prize winning quality, somehow that cheapens their career as a writer. But she's fantastic. What do you think Pearl Buck would say today about writing? Because we see, you know, a sort of a shift in writing to you know, the True Blood stories and the and the the Nicholas Sparks type stories and the James Patterson spy thriller type stories. Well, what do you think she would say about that today, having studied her so much?
Well, she was really interested in reaching ordinary people. So I think that she might appreciate some of those books. I think she was a more contemplative writer. A lot of the books today are, at least the common genres, which is what I write, by the way, they're not academic. They're very accessible, and a lot of it there's always sex in them. I don't put sex in my books, by the way. My niece might, but I have to cut it out. So I think she might appreciate reaching out to common people. I don't think she would appreciate anything that's really brutal, that it would in any way influence people into brutal acts. So
Interesting, very good. I want to ask you too about what writers influence you. What writers have influenced you. Obviously, Pearl Bucket sounds like it's had an impact on you.
Definitely.
But other writers that have influenced you, and what are you reading right now?
I'm trying to think. I don't read fantasy novels, and yet I've written them, except for Madeleine L'Engle. I actually read spirituality. I'm very interested in spirituality, so I read people like Thomas Merton, Richard Rohr, Joan Chittister. These are all people that are, they're nonfiction. So that is actually certainly what interests me in terms of deepening my understanding. In terms of skill, I don't know what to say. I just read whatever comes my way. I go to the library all the time and I bring books out and fiction. And a lot of times I can't read it because it doesn't, it just doesn't resonate with me. Mm-hmm. So who influenced me? My husband influenced me, Philip St.Clair. He's my editor, and he was, he's taught me a lot about writing, very gently. The marriage is still together.
That's good. That is great. And we should mention too that Philip St.Clair was a previous guest on Chapters, Kentucky poet, and we had him on and enjoyed our time with him as well. Tell us a little bit about Tinian True, one of your latest books, and you mentioned that you collaborated on that with your niece and sort of co-authored that. But what's that book about, and where did the inspiration or the impetus come to write that kind of a book?
It was such an amazing journey. I had gone to England for a surprise birthday party for my brother, who is Mandy's father. So I was staying at her house secretly for a couple of days before this party. And she had put me in her daughter's playroom. So my case was just there open. I hadn't unpacked anything. And I looked in it and I found this copper coin under my clothes, and I thought Mandy was making a joke, and I took it down because I thought it was an Asian coin. Didn't know what it was, and I thought it was something to do with the Pearl Espec, the Chinese. So I said, Mandy, very funny, huh? She said, I didn't put it there. I said, how did it get in my suitcase? And so she asked her daughter, who's 4, who said she didn't know anything about it. And so this mysterious coin was there. So we began spinning a story. It was like, first of all, we needed to know what kind of coin it was, and it turned out it was a 10 yen piece. And so we began this whole process of what are we going to do with this story, and she wanted to have terrorists, and it kind of gets to some of that in its way. But because of my connection to spirituality, I wanted to start with a mysterious monk. And so it's a story that's it has several people. There are 4 coins, and the people are connected through these coins. There's something they have to do. There's a task they have to do in order to grow in their lives. So it was fun, and it's probably fairly strange.
I was going to ask you about the coin, because it's so unique to build a story around an object instead of a person or an event, or someone's died or someone's been killed or someone has done something or other, to build it around an object. So what is it about this coin as the story unfolds, without giving too much away.
Yeah.
What is it that pulls these characters through the narrative, specifically regarding this item?
The story begins with a Buddhist monk in Japan, and he finds these coins. A little boy gives him these coins, and he knows he has to do something with them. So he is the thread throughout the story, and he is surprised that he has to work with Americans and English because he doesn't like Americans. And so his own growth is happening too. Although he is a bodhisattva, he's a very developed spiritual being. He still has some areas where he has to grow, but he's the glue. And throughout the story, it begins with a prologue with him, but then he appears periodically. And he brings together these four people that don't know each other.
Interesting. So the object really does, like you said, is kind of the glue that holds everybody together.
Yes.
And it has different effects on people.
And of interest is I've written a prequel to this. And someone asked me, well, how did the monk become a monk? So I wrote the prequel, and Mandy, she wrote the sequel, and now we're doing another one. And she just read my chapter. We're going back and forth, and she responds with one of her characters saying, "Not those damn coins again."
So we're back.
We're back. We can't get rid of them, but
great.
it's fun.
Well, were there any challenges looking back on it in writing 10 Yen True that maybe that didn't seem like challenges at the time, but looking back they were, or anything that slowed down writing the book in any way?
Well, for me, the challenge was being a mentor for my niece. That I really did not want to offend her and wanted to help her grow and wanted to encourage her to have her own voice. And at one point, I was sort of beating around the bush, trying to say something about the actual writing and structure. And she just said to me, spit it out, Christina. And so my fears of offending her were, in the way. And but it was okay because she was strong enough, and I don't think I would have been, So that was something new. And we had a lot of help. We had editing it, and of course my husband edited the book too, bless his heart, because he's a literary writer, and this is not literature. But he helped a lot, and he spent time talking to Amanda about her style and understood it, which I don't. I can't really do the, diagramming sentences or anything like that. But she did a brilliant job. She's amazing.
It sounds like a fantastic book, and I know you kind of alluded to this earlier in our interview, but what is it that you're working on right now? You mentioned that you're co-authoring another book with her. Is this the prequel to 10 Yen True that you're co-authoring?
No, that one's done, and that will be coming out in August. And Mandy wrote the sequel she did completely by herself.
Great.
And that's coming out, I don't know, probably a little bit after that. We haven't got the publication date yet. So we're working on a story called... I can't help myself because it's so funny. 10 Yen Tokyo. It's like they're back.
They're back. Those coins.
And our plan is we're going to go there someday when the money comes in.
Sure.
But
sure.
10 Yen Tokyo began just recently. I saw a seagull over Ashland, Kentucky, and I began writing about this seagull. And the seagull became a personality. And so I contacted my niece and said, you want to do another one? 10 Yen Tokyo. And so we're off and running with this story with this person who's leaving her family and her newborn baby. And we're going to deal with the issues surrounding that. And we don't really know where it's going yet. So it's brand new. And
sounds fantastic. Sounds like a really interesting storyline. So
thank you.
Certainly look forward to that. I wanted to ask you too, and before we let you read a passage from one of your books, at the top of the show we read your quote about ebooks, and we've talked a little bit about publication dates for your books and upcoming titles. But that is something I think that a lot of authors hear about but don't really know about, and that is this idea that ebooks offer you another way to get your work out there, another way to get published aside from going with a traditional publishing house or one of the big five publishers like Random House or someone else of that sort. You know, everybody wants to be there, but that if you can't get to that level yet, or for whatever reason can't get there at all, that there's another option. Can you talk to us a little bit about your experience with ebooks and why you found that to be a viable medium for publication?
I think because they accepted my books. I had, two books, Unexpected Journey, which is historical fiction, and Emily's Shadow, which is fantasy, I'd been working on for years and years. And every so often I'd dust them off and I'd revise them and send them out to all of the big publishers. And I couldn't get anywhere. And so one day I sent them to some e-publishers, and they were both accepted. I was a little dubious about that, a little offended even, was a bit snobbish about it, like e-books. But it has finished the projects, and they went through processes of editing. There were no advances. Marketing is difficult. It's a whole new realm to market ebooks. But it finishes a project. It is a validation. It gives energy to new work. And I fully hope that eventually my books will sell. They haven't much recently, or, that's just been part of the process. But I would say this, I found these were both e-publishers. One's been around a long time and had a pretty good reputation, and the other was fairly new. Both have been amazing, but the second one that was new has done a lot to encourage marketing and to give venues of where to go, to get on sites like Goodreads, to advertise. They're having a Facebook party where all of their authors are going to give opportunities for people to get their books. So that has been brilliant. As far as ebooks that you self-publish, I have done it. I have a few that I've put online because I quite frankly didn't feel like the process of searching for publishers. The danger in that is that the book is not up to par, that it's really needs a lot of work, but you think, well, I wrote it, it must be brilliant, and of course usually our first writing isn't. So that's a big danger. Also, marketing, once again, how are you going to market it? And that's a big challenge for me. How to get the work out there, get people to want to read it. It's difficult.
Yeah, it is one of the things that, and we could probably talk, you and I, for probably another 30 minutes just on marketing and that aspect of what do you do once you get that book ready for publication. But in our time remaining, I wanted to give you an opportunity to read an excerpt from one of your books so our audience can get an idea of your style of writing and how you write. Before we get to that, if anyone is interested in getting a copy of your books or getting in touch with you about writing or about your books, how can they best reach you or get a copy of your books?
You can get them on Amazon, or you can contact me through my website, which is www.ChristinaSt.Clair.com. I also write a blog, which is a marketing technique, by the way, and I love to do it. It's a lot of fun. And that's www.ChristinaSt.Clair.com/blog. They're separate, so that's how you can reach me.
Great, fantastic. Well, we'll turn the floor, so to speak, over to you for a few minutes.
Thanks,
and let you read. I think you're going to read from 10 Yen True, so tell us a little bit about what you're going to read from that book.
Okay, thank you for the opportunity. And I'm going to just read the prologue. I've talked about the monk who glues this together, and so the prologue is the monk that Amanda and I met on this strange journey with coins, 10 yen coins. For many years the monk sat beside the Ajiki pond in the early morning, as he did today, breathing in the peaceful settings of the Pure Land gardens. He inhaled deeply the fragrance of jasmine and lotus. The cool morning air refreshed him. Soon the sun would rise in the sky and the day would become increasingly hot and humid. Sometimes his meditation took an hour, maybe more, but always he sat here away from the others. Ordinarily, he felt at peace with nature and with the world. Today, however, was different. Something churned inside him, causing his usual calm to be replaced by sorrow, making him feel restless and helpless. He was angry at the awful atrocities of nature so recently bestowed upon his people. The tsunami, that powerful wave from a sea gone wild, was not so unusual here in Japan. This one had snatched away thousands of people, young and old, innocent babies and little creatures alike, leaving whole villages crushed. It seemed incomprehensible to him. The wave had severely damaged the nuclear power plants, but the damage from leaking radiation could not even be seen. No wonder he found himself questioning the unknown and unpredictable forces of the world. In spite of his balanced spiritual state of mind, there was something more he did not understand about this latest tragedy. His wisdom and experience had taught him long ago the gods have a purpose and it must be accepted. However awful, it must never be challenged. This unrest in him refused to go away today, though. He felt as if he were being confronted with an obligation to discover the reasons why the gods had become so angry. Was this a test? A task? Desperately, the monk tried to calm himself, struggling with the angry thoughts swirling around in his brain, threatening to cut his conscious mind into shreds. What did the gods want of him? A sudden breeze blew across the pond, startling the monk. He smoothed his gray robes around his legs, wishing he could help even a few of the people in more tangible ways than merely through prayer and funeral rites. His eyelids closed. He resumed his steady breathing, trying to focus his mind within the chamber of his heart, trying to still the darts of anger. The sun's warmth upon his face belied a bone-chilling cold creeping up his spine. Shivering, fearful, he looked skywards at rolling black clouds. Hearing the swishing of robes, he turned to see a small, dark boy standing behind him. He looked deep into those young black eyes and breathed in sharply, giving a slight nod to the child, indicating permission to communicate. The boy knelt before the monk, his head bowed, hands together in respectful prayer. The monk put out a gentle hand and placed it on the shaven head of the youngster. He closed his eyes, concentrating on giving spiritual energy and wisdom to this young one. But he felt power emanating from the child into his soul as well. A roar of thunder came from the darkened skies and seemed to vibrate through his mind and his body. Lightning flashed, striking the pond, igniting his awareness. At once, the monk understood. He knew what he must do. He held out his hand to the boy, who wordlessly reached into the obi around his waist and handed the monk a silk pouch. The monk knew, without looking, what was inside. Coins. Lucky 10-yen pieces for those who received them. The recipients, though, would not understand or appreciate the gift they were going to receive.
Fantastic, fantastic. What a great passage. And I enjoyed 10 Yen True so much. It was a great book. But Christina St.Clair, thank you so much for joining us here on Chapters. It was a pleasure. We appreciate it so much.
Thank you, Eliot. I really feel honored.
Thank you so much. And finally, we want to give a special thanks to our friends at Empire Books and News here at Pullman Square in downtown Huntington for providing our studio taping system and our studio taping setup here. And we encourage you to stop by Empire Books and News to satisfy all your reading needs. They have the Tri-State's largest selection of magazines, and many of the authors that you have seen featured here on Chapters have their books for sale here at Empire Books and News. So no matter what genre it is, no matter what reading taste you have, stop by and talk to Charlotte and her staff at Empire Books and News, Pullman Square in downtown Huntington. They can get you taken care of for all your reading needs, and we appreciate them allowing us to tape this episode of Chapters here today. And finally, if you have a question, comment, or suggestion about this Chapters program or any Chapters program that you've seen here on Armstrong Cable, we would like to hear from you. You can send us an email right to the show at the address that you see here at the bottom of your screen, LP4, that's the letter L, the letter P, the number 4, at zoominternet.net. We do appreciate all the feedback that we get from you, and we certainly encourage you to keep those emails coming to us here at Chapters. And that's going to do it for us this time on Chapters, but please come again next time, and in the meantime, stay tuned to this station for news and views that impact you and your community.